Hey everybody, this is Paul from This Way the Aquarium. Today's video I want to talk about how I plan on securing driftwood. Now this is driftwood that doesn't stay down in the tank. I do have a piece of driftwood over here. It's kind of hard to see in this tank. It's soaked in water long enough that it doesn't float. Whereas these other pieces I have obviously float. I'll show you in a clip here soon. But basically the problem is it's still buoyant, it floats in water. Obviously I don't want it floating in water. I want it sitting on the bottom of the tank to be part of the decorations. So in this case, I plan on gluing those pieces of driftwood to rocks. That's going to be my strategy. There are different ways of doing it too. For instance, you can weigh it down with rocks. You can put rocks on top of it, but you might not be interested in the way it looks. For example, you've covered up all your driftwood with rocks and then you don't really see the driftwood, so that might not be a great idea. Other people use the method of tying it down with some sort of fishing twine, fishing line, or some other type of line to secure it to rocks or secure it to something else at the bottom of the tank so it doesn't float away. The problem with that is with things like fishing line, your fish can get stuck in there. They can get cut up in there by the fishing line. I've heard of stories where fish get caught in there, they end up getting killed in there. So in my case, my plan is to use super glue, some cotton, and as well as the stone, attaching the driftwood to the stone. And then it's a pretty simple process I'm going to show here in a few minutes. For the method where you're weighing it down with rocks, you're holding it down with rocks. After a couple weeks, the driftwood should be sufficiently waterlogged, meaning it's taking on enough water so it's not going to float, in which case you can remove those rocks. You don't need to worry about those rocks anymore. You can rearrange your rockscape, your decorations, to more highlight the driftwood. That's in the situation where the driftwood is going directly in the tank. Obviously, you can soak the driftwood if you've got a spare bucket or spare bin somewhere where you can fill in water and just let it soak. Tie those pieces of driftwood up so they stay underwater and take on enough water. Within a couple of weeks' time, it should take on enough water where you can take it and then directly put it into the tank, and it should not float. You do need to watch it because that stagnant water can get moldy, can have other issues. So if I were doing that method, I would recommend taking a look at it every couple of days, just seeing the water, if it's not moldy or anything like that. And you will need to swap out the water, take out some of the old water, put in new water. That way you're just cycling in fresh water. Also, any tannins that leach out of the driftwood into that water, you're removing that. You're allowing more tannins to come out as well too. Some people don't want those tannins in their tank. Other people do like those tanks. You might have seen dark water tanks where they allow the tannins to leach out in the tank. Nothing wrong with tannins leaching out in the tank. It's just some people want the clear water look, which is fine, which is great. Tannins in and of itself aren't going to harm your fish. They're not going to harm any inhabitants in your tank. So let's take a look at some of this driftwood over here and how I plan on dealing with it. So as you can see here, this clearly floats. It's not going to sink unless it's weighed down. So I can let it soak in here for a couple of weeks. Eventually it would get enough water in it, get waterlogged basically, and then it could go straight into the tank. So when it comes to placement of your driftwood, as you can see here, I've got these two pieces, like this one piece right here I showed you, it does float. So even though it was boiled earlier, it still floats. As mentioned, you could keep it in a bucket full of water and soak it for a couple of weeks. But if you don't have that time, you just got a piece and you want to add it to your tank, definitely can stack like rocks on top of it. But maybe you don't want that look. You don't want the rocks covering up your driftwood, like in this case over here. I've kind of built a little cave-like setup over there. Stacking rocks on top of it is going to take away the look that I'm looking to go for there. So instead, what I will do is end up gluing these pieces of driftwood to the rock using cotton and super glue, which I'm going to show here in a few minutes. With this piece of driftwood here, it's very heavy, so I don't expect it to float. And in fact, I'm pretty sure it's not going to float just based on the weight of it. It's a little more dense than these other pieces of driftwood over here. So I don't need to worry about gluing this one down. Whereas these two, on the other hand, definitely will need to be glued down. Here's an example of a piece of driftwood that was boiled for a couple of hours just to get rid of tannins and help sanitize the wood. And as you can see, right away it was sinking. I didn't have to worry about it floating at all. It was actually boiled in the same batch as these two other pieces of wood over here. But for whatever reason, this one did take on enough water, stays down. I don't need to worry about it floating. These two pieces, on the other hand, are clearly floaters that I do need to secure properly. So for this, as you can see, I've got the rock set up. I'm going to use a cotton ball just like this over here and cut it in half. But the cotton ball is going to go on top of the rock with super glue. It's going to be glued on the rock, and then I'll add some glue to the top of the cotton ball, and then from there I'll add the driftwood on top of the cotton ball. Let it set. Doesn't need to go in right away. Obviously the tank it's going in right now, it's empty tank. There's no water in it. Super glue does cure pretty quick. And for this, since I'm using cotton, like the cotton ball I mentioned, I'm going to be using a super glue gel. Purchased a pack of this from the local hardware store. So I prefer to use gel versus the regular glue. Can get pretty runny, can make a little bit more of a mess. Whereas the gel is not going to be as messy. Just apply a dab of super glue onto the rock, and then fix the cotton ball to the rock. Then top it off with some more super glue on top of the cotton ball. It's not going to be pretty at this point in time. It doesn't need to be. The way I'm positioning this in the tank is the rock will be buried somewhat and at an angle. You won't be able to see the cotton because this is basically we're looking at from the back side. This will be facing the back of the tank. Now that's cured, I might add some more glue here to both the rock side and well as the driftwood side, just to make sure it gets a good adhesion. Just press it into place. I'll hold it for 10-15 seconds just so it gets a good adhesion. You do need to make sure the cotton is properly soaked with the glue as well too. That's just going to make sure it has a solid grip. Pressure from the water lifting the driftwood is not going to tear the cotton, in which case you're back to square one. You got to start over again. And I would just use the same process. Use the cotton, just make sure it's thoroughly saturated with glue, let it set. In this case I'm going to let it set here overnight. The tank it's going to go into still needs some more work. I've got another piece of driftwood as well I need to glue. So it's going to be a little while before I fill up any water in that tank. Now if you do have a rock that's more flat, or your driftwood has places where you can apply the glue directly to the rock and to the driftwood, and that's definitely going to be the way to go as compared to using the cotton. But not all rocks are the same shape. As you can see, this rock is pretty curved, so due to the curvature of the rock and the curvature of the driftwood, it doesn't have a good surface to bind to each other. Another possibility I would recommend is, if you wanted to, you could from underneath shave a piece of the wood off. If you got a Dremel or some other rotary tool, make it so it's flat. So when you got a flat enough space over here and it contacts enough of the rock over here, you can glue that directly in. And you should also have no issues doing that as well too, gluing it directly on top of the rock. That glue will hold for a while. And super glue is non-toxic to your aquarium once it's cured. It's not going to do any harm to your fish or anything else living in your tank for that matter. So that's all I have for this video. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to drop them in the section below. Let me know your thoughts on this method. Are there any other methods that you've used to secure driftwood in your tank? Let me know down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.